Welcome CSC230 to exercise 13B. This will be an add-on to exercise 13 where we'll be working with the JavaScript DOM, except now we'll be using a button and multiple buttons to use events to call a function. So let's get started. We can use the same repel that we were using before and just fork it. So I'm going to open that up. Now you might see it here in your recents, or you could go here to your repels and just open it up from there. And here's 13, DOM practice. I'm going to open that up. And remember, to fork something, you have to go on the title here, and then you have to go to the little dots that are here, the settings, and just go to fork. And then it allows you to change the name. So I'm just going to call it 13B, and I'll call it JS button. And I'll leave my name there. And when it opens up, as usual, we can click on this thing to open it in a new tab. That's what we did last time. And we can go here and we can shorten this. And we can go here and open up W3 Schools. And we'll check out how a button works. Now in the past, in the CSC130 course, we do an exercise, Show Hide Patrick, where we put an event on an HTML button. And we do it right in the HTML, but we're going to do this all in JavaScript, so we don't have to mix any JavaScript inside the HTML, just like we don't like to mix any CSS inside the HTML. So we're going to go to W3 Schools. And hopefully you checked out some of the resources for JavaScript. So I'm going to go to JavaScript, and I'm going to be looking for something called addEventListener. So that may be in the DOM. I could go down to the DOM, and there's addEventListener. And we're basically going to tell a button to listen for a certain event. And it's not too hard. Here's document.getElementById, which we've been using, and we'll make a button ID for that. And we'll just add this addEventListener method, and it's going to have two things in it. It's going to have an event like a click, it could have a mouse over, and then we're going to run a function. So we're going to have to do a function here to change something. So we'll introduce a function with the button here. So one thing we're also going to have to look at is functions. We're going to look at how to define a function. And basically the way that works, if you've worked with Python at all, the way they use like def, they use function as the keyword. So it's going to be function, a function name, and then any parameters or arguments inside the parentheses, and then open and closing curly braces. And that's pretty much it. And let's just do a couple things here. I guess we got to make a function first. I was thinking we could just work with the buttons, but we'll go and make a function. So we can convert some of this into a function. Now what I'll do is I'll just kind of take one of these things here that we did, antique white. Maybe we'll just run a function with a button to change the background color. So I'm just going to copy that and go down to the bottom. And I'll do a function, and I'll just say function keyword, and there it is. And I'll give it a name, and I'll just call it change background. And we'll put parentheses. Now we don't have to put anything inside there yet. We don't have to put any parameters. And remember, in Python you put a colon, but in JavaScript we put an open and closing curly brace, just like we do in CSS. So there's our function. And then what I'll do is I'll just paste this in here. Now we can declare variables, we could do different things in here, but this should be fine to do this. And instead of antique white, maybe we'll change it to something else. And again, if you're not sure about colors, you could go here, scroll up here, and I like to open this in a different tab. And let's just find a new color like a light blue or something. And again, once you go in here, you could find other blues that you like. There's a nice one, just a light blue like that. I'll just copy that right from here. And that's our function. We're just going to change the background. Now, function calls work like this. If we go here and we look for a function call, and they're calling an invocation first, I guess that's the easiest way to do it. This one's using a variable, so let's just look at a function invocation because we're not using a variable yet. If you've ever used Python, they just kind of repeat the function name in the parentheses and put a semicolon. That's all we're going to do. We're just going to put my function, which would be change background, and we don't have to put anything in there because we're not using arguments yet. We'll get to that, but we just want to show how a button works really to do this. So that's all we have to do for the function call, but we're not going to actually use this outside of here. We're going to put it on a button. So let's go make a button. So if we did do a function call, actually, let me show you this. If we did do a function call, we can just see if we could start typing change background, and it shows up here because we already defined it. And I'll put a semicolon to finish it off. And what should happen if I refresh this, it should just be blue because it should change the background because it's coming after that. So let's see if that happens. And it did. So it's actually working, but we want to make it work with a button. Now we don't have a button, so let's go make a button quick. And we'll put a button, I guess, after the paragraphs. And we'll just use an HTML button, so we could just put button. And I'll give it a class and an ID. So I'll put .btn, and then I'll put a £, button1, btn1. Now, why am I doing a class and an ID? Well, we're going to call it with an ID name, but the class we'll use to style it. So if we want to style our button, we can have a button class that can style a whole bunch of buttons. But then for each button might have a different event that runs on it, or it may call a different function. That way we can have button 1, button 2, button 3, whatever. And it could be like CB, change background, whatever. But we're going to have a class for the styling, and we're going to have an ID to actually find the button. So we'll do that, and then we'll just hit tab. And then inside here, I'll just put a label just called change BG. We'll just have a change background button. So if I go here and I see it, there's my change background button. And I can style it by going into CSS. Now I know we've been doing all our styling in here, but I'll just go in here and just go BTN, and we could style the button really quick by just giving it some padding. And I'll give it a little more on the side. I'll give it, let's try 0.5 em up and down, and let's try 1 em on the left and right, and see what that looks like. And you can see when you put padding, it makes it bigger just based on putting more space around there. And we could put a bigger border or anything, and I don't really have to mess with it right now. Actually, I'm just going to let it go right now. Maybe I'll just make it just a little bit bigger. I'll go 0.7, and I'll go 1.2 em, and just make it a little bit bigger. That's all I need. That's fine for now. We just want to run the function. Now, when I go back to my script, I want to get rid of this. Let's get rid of it, and let's just refresh it. And what we want to have happen is you click on the button and it changes the background to blue. So let's do that. So it's basically, the button is going to call this. Now, instead of doing something on the button, which we could do, we can actually put a on-click event on here, but instead of doing it in the HTML, what I'm actually going to do is do it in the JavaScript. And we can do this after this. We could declare the function first and then put the button here. So I'm going to use document and just use the same process, .get element by ID, and the ID of the button, if you remember, and I'll put it in single quotes, was called button1. That's the ID, and if you're not sure, go look. ID is button1, the class is button. The class is being used to style it, the ID is being used to find it. And then we're going to use the addEventListener. And it comes up right away, hopefully. And what we'll do, if you're not sure, we'll go back here. We'll go down to JS DOM and look to event listener, and you can see that it uses the event in quotes, and then it uses the function name. And also notice without the parameters, it doesn't put parentheses in there for the function name. And we'll talk about the different kind of events and all that kind of stuff, click, on click, all that kind of stuff, and what you could do in here, but we're just kind of easing into it. So we're easing into it, just having the button run a function that's changing things instead of just changing things with regular JavaScript, because this isn't much different than if we just use CSS. So I don't know if there was a point in doing this other than showing how JavaScript works, but now we're actually making it more interactive because the user can control the background. The user can control the size or anything else, and they can make images show and hide and things like that. So the whole idea is to make things interactive. So we'll go here and we'll put click when we click on the button. And is there a comma? Let's check. Yes, there is. There's a comma. And then there's the function name. And let's see if we start typing it. Change. It's not coming up here. Let me see if I hit comma, if it'll start typing it. Change. No, it's not coming up. So you could just go up here and copy this because that's more accurate, less chance of screwing things up. Now also there's no parentheses, so don't put the parentheses in here for that. So that's all you need, and then at the end you should put a semicolon. so that the end of all your statements. Now, just by the way, you don't need a semicolon at the end of a function declaration. We don't have to put a semicolon there. Now, invoking basically means calling a function. I'm not sure why they have function call and function invocation. We'll have to read some of that. But from what I know about Python, invocation really means just kind of calling a function as opposed to defining it. Here we're defining it, here we're calling it. So invocation kind of means the same thing. We're invoking it. So let's go back and try it out. So now we have our function definition, which is telling it what to do. And then here's the button that's going to control it. So let's see if this works. And it doesn't. And let's see why. We have the right ID. We have addEventListener. We have click. We have change background. Did we copy that correct? Did I refresh the page? Maybe not. There we go. I didn't refresh the page. So that's a good troubleshooting advice there. Make sure before you go looking at all your code, wondering if you screwed something up, make sure you refresh the page. So we refresh the page and that changed it. So you could make another one and change it back. We could make a second one, call this change background to blue and have a second one that changes it back to beige. I'll go in my index and I'll make this to blue. And then I'll copy another button. I'll just copy this line. And it'll have the same class. We could do that. And we can also go here and I'll just do a line break. Or we could put them side by side too. That's fine too. If you put them side by side, you could put a NBSP, ampersand NBSP. I think that's right. I'll just look up non-breaking space just to make sure I have it right. I haven't done it for a while, so there's a non-breaking space. So it has a semicolon at the end. That's what I was thinking. These are entities. Oh, there we go. Non-breaking space. And it's ampersand NB. They call these entities. I guess that's why I couldn't find it. I didn't know they called them entities. But it's ampersand NBSP semicolon. So that's what we need for a non-breaking space. That just puts extra space in between. You could put a space, but if you want to put extra, that works. So I'll just put that there between them. And you could put 2 if you want. And again, it puts it at the end. So I had it wrong there. So it puts the semicolon at the end. And there's the right color for my non-breaking space. They turn orange. And let's just see what it looks like right now. And there they are side by side. And this one will change it to blue. And this one will not because we didn't change the function. So let's make a new function. Let's go here. And we can copy both of these things and just paste them. And I'll put change background back. Now we have a kind of a long name here, but I'll just kind of follow the camel case process of starting with a small letter, and then instead of spaces or dashes or underscores, we're using capital letters to kind of break things up. So change background back. And I could have called it change BG blue or something, and change BG beige, whatever. And what I'll do now is this function, which is change background back, I'm going to go up and get that antique white color and just copy it and put it back here. And the button we're using now, we didn't change the button. So let's go back, change the button. This is going to be button 2. IDs should always be unique. So you shouldn't have the same ID for 2 different things, for parts of a page, anything like that. So I'm going to call that button 2. And the class could stay the same because they're styled the same. And that's button 2 now. So now if I go back to my JavaScript, this is going to be button 2. So my button 2 is going to listen for a click event, and then it's going to run this function. It's going to call that function, and it's going to change background back. Kind of a long function name, but let's see how that works. I could hit run here, and I'll go back and make sure that I do what? Refresh the page. And that should make it go back to antique white. So there we go to blue, antique white, blue, antique white, blue, antique white. So you could do that for anything. We'll do one more since that was really easy. We'll go back here and let's see if we could just change one of these back. Now, this is already red. Let's see if we could change the headline. We could probably just copy this. Let's make another function here. Function, and I'll call it change headline color. And I'll put my parentheses and I'll put my curly braces. So we're going to change headline color. Now I'll paste. and it's going to be X1 style color. And what do we want to change it to? Maybe we'll change it to blue, like a dark blue. Now I lost my colors. You could go to your color picker, just find like nice dark blue. This looks good. And you could use color names too. If you like doing color names, you could look up the color names. If you like color names, you can go down here and say, I want dark blue. And then you know that's dark blue. So I'll just go back here and I'll call it dark blue. By the way, you don't have to use the capital D and the capital B. I think that just makes it look nice and it makes it look more organized, but you could just type dark blue. So I'll just go here and make the headline dark blue like that. And it's using XH1, so we already have the variable that we're using, so we're just reusing that variable. So we're just changing that, so we don't have to define anything about the headline in there. And now I could just copy this and put it below here and paste it. We'll do a button here. We'll just copy this one. We'll put some more spaces here, and then we'll call this button 3. And we should change the title here, so I'll just put off-white, or I'll put antique white. And then this is change headline to blue. Now, you know, this isn't very useful right now, although we are changing the interface, and maybe there's things you could do that the user can change things to make it easier to read, but we're changing the headline to blue just to show you what you can do. So this is our new button, so let's just look at our new button, and there it is. Change BG to blue, change BG to antique white, and change headline to blue. And when we go here, we do have 3 IDs, they're all the same class. And now this one is going to be button 3. So that's the new button we're using, and it's still going to be a click, and the function it's going to use is going to be this without the parentheses. So I'll copy that and I'll put it here, and I'll hit run, and we'll go here and we'll refresh it. And that's what it should look like to start. So let's change background to blue. Let's change background to antique white. Let's change headline to blue. Now I don't have anything to change the headline back, but if you wanted to, we'll finish it off by doing that. We'll go here, we'll copy this whole thing one more time. And again, you can put comments in here. I'll talk about comments and all that, but because now that we have all this stuff going on, it'd be nice to have comments to kind of break this up so you know what's going on. So if you got away from it for a couple days and you went back and you're like, what's going on here? I don't remember any of this stuff. So this is headline color, and I'll just go back and I'll change this to red. And this is going to be button 4 because we'll make a new button. And I'll change the function name to headline, change headline color B, and I'll change this headline color red. So now we have different functions for different colors here. And this one will be the new one, will be R. So you got to be careful. Now that we're changing things, make sure they match up. Make sure the function definition name matches up to the call name, and then make sure this one with the B matches up to that. So make sure these are the same. Make sure these are the same. Make sure we have different buttons. We have a button 4. Now did we make a button 4? No. So let's go make a button 4. So I'm going to copy one more button here, and I'll make sure the ID name is button 4, and I'll make this red, and I'll copy these again so it's spaced consistently, and I'll go back here and just double check everything. We have change background back, change headline color. So this would be a good place to put, you know, color names in here, but again, it's just practice. We're just trying things out, so we're not being that strict yet about everything. But change headline color B, change headline color red, and what would be nice is if we changed the headline color that matched the page, but whatever, it's okay for now. So this is a good start for just kind of working with a function and a button. So if everything's okay, let's try it out. And again, the first thing is make sure we refresh it, and that changes it to blue, changes it to anti-white, changes the headline to blue, and that changes it back. And if you like it blue like that, you could colorize everything here. So that's just a little start to using buttons and functions. So our buttons are controlling the functions. We're using this addEventListener method here. That's basically after we find something, which is the button, is basically using an event and calling a function. So we're doing a function call here, or invocation. So that's what we're doing here, and they kind of go in pairs. Easiest way to remember this stuff is they kind of go in pairs. You define the function and what it's going to do, all the things it's going to do. Now you could have multiple things happening in here. You could have a function that changes the background color, the headline. You could have all these things into one function, so you could change the whole interface. You could make a Halloween interface, and it'll change the background color to black and all the body copy to white, and kind of make it look spooky looking or whatever. I think there's a Replit or something that has a Halloween look to it, but or one of the applications we use has like a Halloween theme or something. But anyway, you don't have to use these all separate. You can have one function and then control a whole bunch of things. You could put a number of things in here that change. You could change the X2 color when you do that, so they're all different. So there's lots of things we're going to be able to do with JavaScript. It's pretty cool, but those are some kind of building blocks that we're doing here, and it's part of it's just getting used to typing the code and making sure you get everything correct, and making sure you get the camel case and the commas and the semicolons and double check all that kind of stuff when you do that. And if you do have errors that you can't find in here with color coding, sometimes you could go in here and you can inspect, and you could look at the console. And I'll take this out. This is the inspect down here. We already did an exercise with inspect. But if you go down here with console, if you have any errors with your JavaScript, they'll show up down here in your console. So if we made some definition problem, like I did this, and I ran it, and I went here and refreshed the page, now I get an error, and it says uncut reference, change headline color R is not defined. So it's telling you right here. So if you're ever looking for some error in your code and you're like, I don't know what it is, and you're emailing me, inspect it and check the console. And when it says it's not defined, that usually means there's a problem with the name, that it can't find it. It means you're calling the function here R, but it can't find the definition. So it's not defined. It's not finding the definition. So if I go here and I put it in, there it is. So now when I go back and I refresh it, that error goes away. So that's helpful too as we work with JavaScript and we work with the DOM more, which is the document object model. And again, I'll make more videos where I kind of go over some of these lessons in more detail in terms of terminology. I know I'm just saying, oh, look at this and look at that, but I think doing some hands-on stuff kind of helps from the beginning, and you get used to typing the code, and then we'll start thinking about new things to do when we do this, and things that are more relevant and helpful as well. And putting in comments that make the page easier to look through and all that. So when you're done, that's all you have to do. You could do as many things as you want. You could do more stuff if you want, but as long as we have some buttons that kind of control what we're doing here, you're good. And then just copy that URL, or just say it's finished in your assignments. This will be called 13B under Unit 11, so you'll see that there. I don't think I posted it yet, but it'll be up there in coursework. So this is kind of a little add-on to exercise 13, introducing us to the JS DOM.